All right, we're back with you on the Krueg Show. A Thursday before 49er football will be at Levi's tomorrow night for Niners-Chargers, preseason game number 3. And the man who will be on the call for the Chargers is Matt Money Smith, who's kind of somewhat legendary in Southern California, Petros and Money. We all know our good friend Petros Papadakis on AM 570. And Matt's been doing a number of different things through the years. He's the Chargers play-by-play man. You can hear him on the radio, TV. He's everywhere, and he's with us on the Krueg Show to preview a little bit of Niners-Chargers. Matt, good to see you, man. How are you?
I'm great, Larry. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Well, right out of the chute, what are we going to see very many of the Chargers in this game? It's preseason game number 3, which we've only had for a couple years now in this 3 instead of 4. I saw that they don't play a lot of their starters, at least looking back at the Saints game. Who do you expect to not play for the Chargers?
Just about everybody. It's been a Brandon Staley approach since he was hired. We had the 2 guards play the first 2 games, and that was great because it helped sort of get a gauge on the offense. The starting 5 on the offensive line is exceptional. Could be in the conversation with the 49ers is one of the best offensive lines in the league. The depth behind it is where it gets a little bit shaky, and I think we've seen that in these preseason games. But the last 2, we've had both Zion Johnson, the first-round pick from last year, and Jamari Sawyer, their 6th-round pick, that played incredibly at left tackle. Given the expectations and the circumstances after Rashawn Slater went down, but outside of that, no guys that are listed number 1 on the depth chart have been playing. I'm trying to think. I guess technically, Gerald Everett's the starting tight end, but Donald Parham gets a lot of those reps in the red zone, so Parham's been playing a little bit. But outside of that, it's kind of been the 2s and the 3s, and sort of trying to figure out that practice squad and the depth pieces.
What's been the story this summer with Charger camp?
Well, I think it's mostly been Kellen Moore and a new look offense that I think a lot of fans were disappointed with last year under Joe Lombardi, and sort of mimicked the Drew Brees Saints under Sean Payton. And we all know that Justin Herbert and Drew Brees share very little when it comes to physical characteristics. I think the processors are about the same. It's one of the great things about Herbert and why he's mentioned as a potential best quarterback in the league is he matches those physical gifts with an incredible ability to process and make his way through all the progressions quickly. So there wasn't as much sort of push the ball downfield, take advantage of this incredible arm strength that Herbert has, and ability to really put the button or put his passes on a button. And I think we've seen quite a bit more of that. We've seen aggressiveness downfield. Josh Palmer has been a big beneficiary of that. That's sort of been another storyline. The 3rd wide receiver, if that's what you want to call it, behind Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. Is it going to be Josh Palmer? Is it going to be Quentin Johnson? They both do sort of different things, but Josh Palmer has really had an exceptional camp. On the flip side, been sort of the cornerback conversation about J.C. Jackson, who missed most of last year. He had surgery right before the preseason and then just wasn't quite right when he returned finally, and then got hurt, very shortly thereafter. So that secondary with the return of J.C. Jackson, their big free agent acquisition last year in the offseason, to go with Michael Davis and Asante Samuel, and someone who really emerged last year in, kind of spot duty when pressed into it, Jasir Taylor. So those have kind of been, I think, probably the biggest storylines of everything that's been out there.
Is there more? I mean, I'm predicting Niners-Chargers rematch of Super Bowl 29. I really think I'm bullish on the Chargers this year, as well as the 49ers, that both teams have to have some things go right, and most notably health. But how much pressure, this tremendous, Shanahan and Lynch have pressure here, but they also are well thought of, maybe compared to the last previous regimes. How is the Southern California fan, the Charger fan, feeling about Brandon Staley and Tom Telesco? I'm a big Telesco fan. Is there more pressure on one than the other? Are they a tandem? I know Telesco doesn't have a lot of playoff wins, and he's been there for a while, but he's an outstanding personnel man.
Yeah, I think I'll separate it into 2 categories: the fan and ownership. I think ownership likes both quite a bit. The fans, I think, are a little bit frustrated. They feel like it's a Super Bowl caliber roster. I do think now there's probably more pressure this year than any year, not just because it's year 3 for Brandon Staley or, for as long as Tom Telesco's been here, but just the way they treated this offseason. And, there was a lot of speculation about who might have to be let go in order to make room for this Justin Herbert contract that we knew was coming. And instead of releasing Keenan Allen or Khalil Mack or some of those pieces that they thought were set up to move on to other spots just because the math had to work somehow under the cap, they pushed the money. They pushed it to next year. So it's clear when you do that and you ask Dean Spanos to cut, tens of millions of dollars in signing bonus checks to Keenan Allen and Mike Williams and, to the Bank of Bosa to push that stuff down the road, it signals you expect to make a run this year. And they were able to pay Herbert, and that's one thing about this front off or this ownership group that I think gets lost. And I'm not just trying to be a shill as someone who's an employee, but I think they took incoming in San Diego for frugality. And that just can't be said anymore. They made Joey Bosa the highest paid defensive player in the league when they did his extension. They made Derwin James the highest paid safety in the league when they did his extension. They just made Joey Bosa the highest paid player in NFL history when they did his extension. So clearly Los Angeles has given them the ability to spend money on this team. And between last year's free agency period and this offseason pushing money into the next year, I think they clearly believe this is a Super Bowl caliber roster, and they expect to make a deep run into the postseason.
Is there a player down there that's making a lot of noise? I know the Washington State linebacker Henley had a great game last week against the Chargers or against the Saints. Is there a story or somebody that we should be looking for tomorrow night?
Well, it's been a great rookie class. All of them have really stood out. Now, Quentin Johnston has had issues with drops. And that was the case at TCU. It was the one knock on him. I mean, if it wasn't, there would not have been any controversy over which would have been the first receiver drafted. He's a physical freak. I mean, he's an absolute giant that can fly. He's just had some suspect hands, and that showed its face in the first preseason game against the Rams. He dropped a third down pass from Easton Stick that should have been caught, and then he was able to break free on a go route and drop the ball that was kind of put right where it needed to be. So he, has kind of been working through that. He's been great with the media and said, look, it's just concentration. I need to be more aggressive. And he was able to bounce back last week, caught every one of his targets. So outside of that, though, you mentioned Henley. Thule, I don't think is going to play. Tui Pelotu's been exceptional. They've been looking for depth at that edge position, and he has looked fantastic. In the joint practices against the Saints, he was absolutely wrecking shop in the one-on-ones. And really showed out this past week as well. A lot of pressures, relentless. That's going to be a big one. And then, you mentioned Dayon. He was the best player on the field of either team in preseason game too. Just everywhere, shooting gaps, getting a sack, tackles for loss, tracking guys down sideline to sideline in the pass game. He's going to play. He's going to end up playing on Sundays. I don't know what his role will be, but I think if, Kenneth Murray can't kind of live up to his billing as a first-round pick, which he has not done thus far. It's why they declined his fifth-year option. Then I wouldn't be surprised to see Dayon start taking reps from him. And also, he's one of those sort of Derwin James-like queen on the chessboard where he can play some safety. He can play linebacker. He can play that dollar position that Brandon Staley likes a lot that'll afford Derwin to be able to rush the passer, to play high, that sort of thing. So we're going to see him. And I think, the other big name that's really stood out, and who knows if they did it in back-to-back years, they got Jamari Sawyer in the 6th round, and he became their starting left tackle when Slater went down. But in the 6th round, they got Scott Matlock out of Boise State, the interior defensive lineman. And man, he has been a force. He is strong. He sheds and has been making tackles at the line of scrimmage for stuffs, some tackles for loss. He's going to play. He's going to be in the rotation. I don't know what kind of snaps we're going to be looking at on Sundays, but he also is going to make an impact. And I'll give you one more. Undrafted free agent Gerard Clark out of Coastal Carolina has been an absolute force. He's got to probably clock in at like 350, 360. And he's kind of been that hockey assist guy. He's just collapsing the pocket, and you're seeing those edge players, the Carlo Kemps, the Blake Lynches, get these sacks. And a big part of it is the pressure that Gerard Clark has been putting just straight up the gut.
Do you see it at all the way I see it, that this could be the Chargers' year? I mean, I know they went 2-4 in the division last year. We all know about Kansas City, but Kansas City can't win every year. And I just see San Diego. I see the Chargers as a team on the rise. You already kind of referenced a couple of their impact rookies. Could you picture a run to the Super Bowl in Vegas this year?
Well, I think everybody can say this, but they just have to stay healthy. I mean, I think, Larry, if you were to offer the Chargers roster to the 31 other teams in the league for their roster, I don't know how many are saying no. Kansas City because of Patrick Mahomes, but obviously it starts with the quarterback. So if you feel like Herbert's better than your quarterback, you're probably going to make that anyway. But I mean, when you kind of start going through it, at every level, at how Zion Johnson's going to be a monster this year. And you're going to have the left side of that line with Slater, who I think can get in the conversation as the best left tackle in football, to Zion, to Corey Linsley, who's in the conversation as the best center in football. That's kind of where it all starts there. And then on that defensive line, Bosa said he feels like he has been in the best shape and he has felt better than he has coming into camp in 5 years. You pair that with Khalil Mack, who still's got some juice left. You get to the secondary level, and you got J.C. Jackson and Mikey Davis, who really turned out last year when he was pressed into duty with Derwin James. And then on offense, obviously the pass catchers to go with Austin Eckler. I mean, you've got a roster. You've got everything. So I think there's no excuses except for Kansas City. Kansas City they lead in the fourth quarter seemingly every single game, and they lose the game in seemingly every single game to this Kansas City Chiefs team. They've got to figure that out. It's pretty hard to get to the Super Bowl as a wild card, which means they are going to have to figure out that Kansas City Chiefs riddle, and they just have not been able to do it. They've been close. They've got the lead in fourth quarters. They've got the lead at halftime. They've led in double digits in third quarters, and they just can't get over that hump. So they're going to have to do that this year. If they want to make that Super Bowl run. I just think it's awfully hard to do as a wild card.
A couple more minutes with Matt Money Smith, who's kind enough to give us his time on the Krueg Show as we lead into Niners-Chargers tomorrow night. We'll be down at Levi's for that one. Should be an exciting night. There's a lot of talk here about Trey Lance. You cover the NFL on a national level, so I'll throw it your way. Give me your thoughts on Lance and the, I don't want to say circus, but let's just say soap opera that has gone on with the 49er quarterbacks. You're seeing it from afar. What do you feel is going to happen? Do you have a feeling on Lance? Do you have a feeling on Brock Purdy or the 49er quarterbacks going into this one?
Sure. One of the things I'll bring up on the broadcast, just because, we're Southern California and we were close with Sam Darnold when he was at USC. He was a regular on our show with PMS. And even when he was at San Clemente, and winning that particular division for the CIF Southern section. He's a great basketball player, great guy. Just absolutely loves Sam Darnold. So I'm hopeful, that there's some success in his future. But I'll bring up just kind of that alternate universe, sliding doors, whatever you want to call it. Saleh and LaFleur reportedly were really kicking around the idea of keeping Sam, and that maybe this Shanahan-style offense would fit him really well. So, what if the 49ers trade up to 2 instead of 3, and they get Zach Wilson instead of Trey Lance, and the Jets end up with, Rashawn Slater? There's so many different combinations of that. Obviously, that's not what happened. Instead, they decided to go with Trey Lance. I'll say this in their defense, in working for the NFL Network at that time and covering the draft at that time, there were a lot of people that said Kyle Shanahan traded up to get Mac Jones, that's what he did. That was his guy, and that all of these people in the building had to talk him out of it. That is, you can't trade 3 first-round picks for Mac Jones. It's just not how it works. And that Trey Lance kind of became this high ceiling, low floor. If you go back and look at his box scores from North Dakota State, there's not a lot of passes in there. It's a lot of that championship game that they won. It's like 60 yards passing and 170 yards of rushing. So it was always going to be a big projection. Now, I work with DJ, Daniel Jeremiah, who I think is the best in the business. He loved him. He loved him. They all said the same thing. Like, this is an A-level personality. This is a quality individual. This is someone you can see, a competitor, hard worker. All of those things, all of those boxes were checked. And, I think you combine I think you combine COVID and the lack of starts and that weird senior year with one game. And there were just so many things that happened circumstantially with these players that are just, it's so hard to pretend like we all had the answers when the decisions were being made. But I don't remember a lot of people pushing back that hard. There were the Justin Fields believers that couldn't figure out why he was sliding. And then, there were a few Trey Lance doubters, but I don't know, Larry. I don't remember a lot of people really taking him to task for drafting Trey Lance like I think they would have taken him to task for drafting Mac Jones. It's just kind of how I remember it.
Yeah, and of course Easton Stick and Lance both came out of North Dakota State. Yeah. Last one, Nick Bosa's holding out. He's not going to play in this game. Just from being around the Chargers, Matt, and and knowing, Joey Bosa and how hard his agent drove those negotiations. What do you expect to see with Bosa? Do you think he's there week 1 at Heinz Field against the Steelers? Do you think this takes a while? It seems like the Bosas really want to have record-breaking deals. They're record-breaking deal talents.
Yeah.
Give me your perspective.
Yeah, Larry, that's why I think it gets done. I mean, Nick Bosa is the best edge rusher in the league. Pay him. Make him the highest paid edge rusher in the league. It's that simple. Now, the only thing I can imagine maybe getting in that way is sort of like that Aaron Donald contract, if they want to be the highest pay, or if it's like a quarterback-like contract. Hey, we don't have a quarterback. You've got Mr. Irrelevant at quarterback. I'm the most important player on this team. Pay me like a quarterback. Maybe there's something weird like that going on. But to me, it's pretty easy negotiation. Hey, here's the highest paid edge in the league, and here's how much more we're going to give you. Now let's get out there. And I think that's because that's what happened with Joey. It took a while, and it was a little weird for a second, but then he just became the highest paid edge player in the league, and everything was fine. And it's just kind of what I envision this, because I think it's just crazy. It's not not a quarterback. The non-quarterback positions, and even the quarterback positions, are pretty easy now. We all knew that Justin Herbert was going to become the highest paid player in the league, and that was all there was to it. And eventually it was going to get done, and it did. And I'm just thankful that they got it done, and we're not going through what the Bengals are going through right now. And it's a huge distraction for a team that has Super Bowl aspirations, much like the 49ers do. So it'll get done. It'll get done in the next 4 days, and it'll all be, much ado about nothing.
Matt, we're big fans of your career, man. You've carved out a great thing down there in Southern California. On your way out the door, compare your two on-air wives, I guess. Petros Papadakis and Daniel Jeremiah are nothing like each other. How do they compliment you, or do you compliment them?
Well, I think they certainly have something in common. When I do a show with Petros, or I do a game with DJ, and that's just, being able to recognize, and it's so important, when you're part of a tandem, is, recognize talent and don't be afraid to get out of the way if it's rolling. And I think that's something that I've always recognized calling football games. It's an analyst sport. And if you've got a really good analyst, your broadcast is going to be so much better the more they can talk. The play-by-play will take care of itself. I can call a play in a couple seconds and get out of there. So DJ can break down just his miraculous ability to see what all 22 people were doing at the same time on the field. And I want to give him as much time to do that. With Petros, it's the same. We both are, I think we're similar, but we're different, mostly in our presentation. But I think we each sort of have a non-traditional approach to sports talk radio, and it's all about supporting each other in that approach. And it's great. Look, Petros and I are in our 18th year, so clearly we're comfortable with one another and enjoy doing the show together, or else it would not have lasted this long. So I guess for DJ, I am on my 6th year. I haven't hit the 7-year itch. Already passed that long ago with Petros, and we're well on our way to being a cranky old couple that probably won't talk to each other, in the next 3 or 4 years.
I've always admired you. Got a selfless approach, and you're a pro's pro, man. I'll let you go. I know you got to get out to the stadium. Safe travels up here for the game tomorrow. Have a great call and a terrific season. Thanks for jumping on the Krueg Show and giving us your perspective. Always appreciated.
Absolutely, I appreciate it, man.
All right, but there you go, Matt Money Smith. Wait a second. There we go.
Yeah, I'm the one that's left. Now I got to do a
Wait.
New York.
There we go. Thanks, Matt. Anyway, hit the wrong button, but there you go. Matt Money Smith is fantastic in Southern California. You can catch him, Chargers play-by-play man, host of AM 570 with Petros Papadakis, who's one of the best in the biz, and we really appreciate him jumping on the Krueg Show. All right, let's do this. Let's hit the sponsors right now, and then we'll come back, hit the chat, have a few thoughts, and then call it a day on the Krueg Show. We're brought to you by Marin Auto Glass, marinautoglass.com. Check them out on the web. If you shatter a windshield, maybe you have a cracked windshield, you need someone to come out and replace it, marinautoglass.com, 415-883-3030. They do a great job. They'll pop out the old windshield, come to where you're at, glazing a new one, sweep away the glass, one-stop shop. Very, very cost-effective. Marin Auto Glass for all of your windshield and glass needs as far as cars are concerned. And, of course, New York Style Sausage Company, the best sausage in all of Northern California. And then Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out in Emeryville and Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week in both spots from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. or until they run out. Pig in a Pickle, the best barbecue there is in Northern California. Go say hi to Damon, go say hi to Mary, and tell them that Larry Krueger sent you. And here's their location in Corte Madera.
We grew up with a Sunday dinner. That means no matter how busy you were, no matter where the hell you were, you came to dinner on a Sunday night. Yeah, Sunday dinner without sausage, it's like a church without God. You know, how can you go to church if you don't believe in God? You know, and along with the sausage also became the discussions. That was discussion night. You know, it wasn't a typical family that you sit there and you're quiet, you know, and you don't talk with a mouthful. Oh no, man. Italians talk when they're eating. Italians even talk when they're sleeping. And definitely we talk with our hands. So if we can't express it through our mouth, through our lips, we express it with our hands. So, and that's what sausage is, really. It's an expression, you know, that life is good.
All right, welcome back to the Krueg Show on this Thursday, August the 24th, almost noon on the West Coast, 3 o'clock on the East Coast. Let's hit the chat for just a second. Easy Mercs says, Pig in a Pickle looks so good. Yeah, oh yeah. You got to hit Pig in a Pickle. 2 spots, Emeryville and Corte Madera. If you're in Northern California, check out Pig in a Pickle. Eric Hernandez says, any starters playing tomorrow? How will the quarterback reps be split? We don't even know who's going to play. We don't know who's going to play. That's the part about this that, you know, it's a lot of unknowns here. You know, just checking out Twitter and some of the talk on Twitter, John Lynch had this reaction to, you know, he talked about Trey Lance this morning. He says, Trey handled it incredibly well with class. He was devastated, and rightly so. When you put your heart and soul into something and it doesn't come to fruition, you're going to be devastated, and that's the type of competitor that he is. So, okay. And then we have this one from Mike Silver. So to review, the 49ers decided to, A, have Kyle Shanahan say the competition hadn't been decided at his Tuesday media session. B, give Lance the news Wednesday morning and send him home before practice. C, go on the radio today and talk about how well he handled it. Got it. So, you know, I mean, at this point, I don't know. Wake me when the season starts. Let me know how this all shakes out. I really don't know how it's going to shake out. If I was making a prediction, I would predict that the 49ers will wind up trading Trey Lance possibly to the Vikings for a pick or a player, or with a pick and a player for a pick or a player. The 3 guys I could see coming back. I mean, people are saying, you know, Danielle Hunter. Danielle Hunter is not coming to the Niners. I just don't buy that. But the Niners do need defensive end help, and the Vikings have Marcus Davenport. The Vikings have Andre Carter II, the rookie out of Army. The Niners could use another defensive back. The Vikings are supposedly shopping cornerback Andrew Booth, who's had a lot of injuries throughout his football life. So that would be my guess. But who knows? Who knows? At this point, I mean, they clearly want to make Sam Darnold the number 2. Why? I don't know. My guess is that they feel that Sam Darnold's floor is higher than Trey Lance's floor, and that probably plays into this. But I don't know. I really don't know. It's a very bizarre situation. They traded a lot to move up for Trey Lance. He got 4 starts. They've seen him for 3 years. He had an injury. He had a year where he redshirted. He had a year where he was injured. So what do you got? What do you got? You got 4 career starts. At times he looks really, really good in practice, and at times he looks really, really raw. And I think that's why they've made the professional evaluation that Darnold gives them a better floor. Do they want Trey Lance on the roster as the number 3 quarterback at $9 million? There's a cap element to this. John Lynch also said this today. Trey made incredible leaps and bounds this year. I think his games showed that. I give him a lot of credit because we didn't tailor an offense around him that highlights a lot of the things that Trey is able to do, and I think he grew from that. So they kind of made it clear that last year was about Trey, and you could see it in practice reps. There was a lot of read option. There was a lot of QB runs. This year, there's much more of the quick game, the short game, lots of screen passes, hardly any read option, if any. It's all, last year may have been geared towards Trey. This year it's all geared towards Brock. In kind of a weird, odd development, I actually think that Trey would benefit better from the offense that he's running this summer than the offense he ran last summer. He's not Lamar Jackson. He's not Michael Vick. He's not even Steve Young. He's an athletic player who can scramble. He's not a runner. I think he should be developed as a pocket passer. And if they want to, get the ball out of his hands quickly, I mean, that doesn't highlight what he does well because he doesn't throw the screen passes with touch and timing. And it takes a lot of feel and touch and timing, and the ball's got to come out. But he is a good play faker. When he's under center, he's operated the play action game at North Dakota State from under center. To me, he looks really, really natural operating the play action game. So, I don't know what to say about exactly what's gonna come of Trey Lance. All I would say is at the end of the day, I'd rather the 49ers do right by the team than hand him to another team in the name of Trey needs a fresh start and we're just going to give it to him and we're going to chalk it up as an L. I don't think the 49ers are in the position to chalk up anything as an L. I mean, they ain't going that good. Yes, they've been in 3 of the last 4 NFC championship games, but I don't know that they're going so good that they can invest what they invested in trading up for Trey Lance and then just hand him to a team like the Vikings for a 7th-round pick or for some nominal deal and say, you know what, we're doing right by Trey. If you had 2 or 3 Lombardi trophies in the trophy case, then I guess you could do whatever you wanted to do. But I don't see them in that position. I think that if they're going to move them, they got to get something. And I'll maintain what I've maintained for months. I wouldn't trade Trey Lance. I predicted they would. But if I'm moving him for something that helps me win the Super Bowl this year. 49ers Sports Talk, 49ers and NFL News 24/7. Says trade idea. 49ers send quarterback Trey Lance to the Minnesota Vikings for edge rusher Danielle Hunter. Your thoughts? Yeah, that'd be great. That would be great. The Niners need Danielle Hunter. The question is, do the Vikings need Trey Lance as their backup to Kirk Cousins and Nick Mullins at $9 million? And maybe they do. Maybe this is a very attractive deal for Minnesota because they're looking for some solution post Cousins. And, you got a young kid who's a great guy who's got a lot of upside, who's from Marshall, Minnesota. They would put, the fans there would embrace him. He would get I think he needs more time to, believe it or not, even though he's sat and watched, I believe if you ask me what would make him more successful, I think he needs more time to sit and watch. And I know people say, that's crazy. He needs to play. No. He needs to play well. That's the key in the NFL. When you get your chance to play, you have to play well. If you play and you play poorly, your team loses. When you play and you play poorly, your body gets broken. So it's about not having him play until he can go out there and play well. I think he still needs a little bit more seasoning, and I think if he could go a place where he could sit for one more year and have a fresh start, that probably would be in his best interest. The Jets behind Aaron Rodgers, the Vikings behind Kirk Cousins, where there's a defined number one quarterback, and there's no pressure at all to play, and you could just concentrate on learning from veteran guys who would probably be willing to share with him. I think that's probably a good situation for him. But we got this one. He says, Easy Timo says, Larry, you're killing me. Are you on board or not? On board with what? I'm on board with what? I predicted they would trade him. There's a big difference between predicting somebody would be traded and wanting him to be traded. I don't want him to be traded. Especially not if you're getting nothing in return. As critical as I've been at times of his rawness as a player, I also see the upside. I really believe that whoever has the ability to show patience with Trey Lance will be rewarded on the back end. But the Niners are in a position on the cap with this roster, and what his cap figure is this year at $9 million, next year at 14 or 15 million, it starts to get prohibitive. You can't have a $15 million third string quarterback. You can't. And you may not be able to have a $9 million third string quarterback. But I don't know. Maybe they can because they have an $840,000 starter. So I think yesterday what we saw was the Niners decided they were going to go with Sam Darnold as the number 2. Immediately there was speculation that they were shopping Trey Lance. Diana Rossini said they've been shopping him all year. John Lynch pushed back on that. He said that's not the case. Then we thought he wasn't playing because they didn't want to get him hurt before a trade. Then it came out that Kyle Shanahan really actually sent him home. Then there were a lot of people speculating on the field yesterday that Trey Lance was not going to play in the game tomorrow night against the Chargers because of the same injury concerns and the risks that are involved, and how that could potentially impact the trade. And yet, from what I'm hearing, he may play on Friday night. So is it Trey's call? And if you're Trey, what would you want? Would you want to be here on this team with all these great weapons and a quarterback room that always gets hurt and an offense that averaged 33 a game last year and, your original team, the only NFL team you've ever known, the only NFL offense you've ever known? Do you want to stay in this offense or do you want a fresh start? And he doesn't seem like the kind of guy that is ever going to say, I want out. It just doesn't seem like it. It just doesn't seem like he's the kind of guy that's going to come out and say, you know what, I want out of here. He seems like the kind of guy that wants to see things through to completion. Jets Gang says, yeah, Rodgers is already helping Zach. You can already see it. It helps that Zach's idol is Aaron Rodgers, so he's going to listen. Yeah, I mean, whether it's Aaron Rodgers or Kirk Cousins, sitting behind a veteran like that, in a fresh start situation where the fans aren't saying what the heck's wrong, what about the investment, blah, 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 and they're really just optimistic about your future, maybe that's in his best interest. But are the 49ers going to hand him to the Vikings and say, here, Vikings, you're in our conference. You can have Trey Lance. Good luck. I don't know. I don't know how it's going to shake out. I'm very eager to see. This is one of the biggest stories in the NFL. People who say, oh, my God, you guys are beating this story to death, blah, 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 blah. It's the biggest story. The Niners are an iconic franchise and one of the favorites for the Super Bowl. They invested 3 number 1 picks in a quarterback who has, varying degrees of potential depending on who you speak to. and has some great days where he looks like the best quarterback in the field. He has some bad days where he looks like he shouldn't play for a year and a half or 2 years. So I don't know what to make of it. I think that Trey Lance has higher potential than Sam Darnold. I think that Trey Lance has a lower floor than Sam Darnold. There are people that disagree with that. But to me, we'll see the way it shakes out. I only want to move off of Trey Lance is if I get something that helps me win the Super Bowl this year. Otherwise, I'd rather him stay. And I understand the cap ramifications of that move. The last thing I want to do is I would not cut him, and I would not hand him over to somebody for a 7th-round pick. Only way I'm moving him is if I get a piece to the puzzle that helps me win the Super Bowl this year. If somehow the deal nets them a defensive end of impact, an offensive lineman of impact, a defensive back of impact, a different young offensive piece to the puzzle, whatever. It has to be something that helps the 49ers. If it's not something that helps the 49ers, then I'm not for it. I'm not for handing Trey Lance over to another team and doing right by Trey just for the heck of it because Trey says he wants a fresh start. No. He's an asset to the franchise, and I think he could be a valuable asset as the number 3 quarterback. So Stephen Draper says it's not a cap thing. They tried to get Rodgers. Yeah, but they've made several decisions since that point that have impacted their cap. They're now committed to the roster they have, which is a loaded roster with all kinds of stars. They want to get this Bosa deal done. What does that do? That gives them probably a little bit of cap flexibility in the present. There's a lot to factor in here, but I'd really be eager to know. Yeah, here is the ultimate right here. This is the ultimate comment from Idiotic Tirades. NFL might need a minor league. If the NFL had a AAA, you just send them to AAA. If they had a G League like the NBA has, you'd send him to the G League. He needs reps. How about them Niners? Says, Larry, would you trade Trey for a situational pass rush specialist? I would. Absolutely. Patrick Seeley says, Larry, you're funny if you're thinking a bad player will get traded for a starter. Yeah, but we're talking about a quarterback. And a lot of times these guys that we're talking about as starters are guys with significant cap figures who are free agents at the end of the year. To me, if the only way the Niners are going to get anything that resembles fair value is if they trade for somebody who's a free agent at the end of the year. Why? Because if you're a free agent at the end of the year, you have less value. So, you might be able to get Chase Young if you traded Trey Lance and a pick. Why? Because he's a free agent at the end of the year. You might be able to get a Devin White out of Tampa. Why? Because you threw Trey Lance in a pick and Devin White's a free agent at the end of the year. So that's the only way you're going to get anything that sounds like a good deal is if you get somebody whose contract's done at the end of the year. But you know what? In the Niners situation where they're absolutely inside their Super Bowl window, that might not be the craziest idea because it's all about 2023. And next year is next year, and you can deal with it when you get there. Question for you, Larry M. Patel. He says, why trade for someone you can get for free next year? Because next year, your entire situation could be different. Next year, Trent Williams could be retired. Next year, George Kittle could be moved on. You don't know who's going to be on your team next year. All you know is you're one of the favorites to win the Super Bowl this year. That's why. Digital Drew says, Larry, you think packaging someone like Flanagan Fowles could net a better haul? Linebacker is deep. Flanagan Fowles, Oren Burks, Curtis Robinson, any of those linebackers I think would be very attractive to teams that need an extra linebacker for sure. But I think it's more like Trey Lance and a 3rd-round pick if you want. I think if you wanted to trade, forget Trey Lance for a second. If you just wanted to get Devin White, let's just say you had a need and you wanted Devin White, I think the price tag would be a 3rd-round pick. If you wanted to get Chase Young, I think the price tag would probably be a 4th-round pick. If you wanted to get Montez Sweat, the price tag would probably be a 2nd-round pick. These guys are all free agents at the end of the year. M. Mattel just made a great point here. Isaiah Simmons was just traded for a 7th-rounder, right? He's probably a free agent at the end of the year. Frank Mann says, keep Trey. So there's a lot of perspectives, and there's going to be a lot of moving and shaking. All I would say is, and I'll maintain it, I predicted Trey to be traded. I still believe he will be. I'm not wishing for him to be traded. In fact, I don't want him to be traded unless the 49ers get an asset that helps them win the Super Bowl this year. And on that note, I've got a conference call in a couple minutes that I got to hit. I'll be doing a live stream tonight at 6:30 on the Vish Kumaran channel. We're going to have a great time. Jesse Naylor, Vish, and I will be breaking down all of this. Check it out. I think it's probably going to go about 3 hours, 6:30 to 9:30 tonight on the Vish Kumaran channel. So until then, everybody have a phenomenal day. Go Niners. We'll see you tomorrow night at Levi's. If you see me there, come over and say hi. Till then, peace.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful, you gon' get exactly what you asked for. Here for whatever you bring me, get it.